Welcome viewers to today's episode of The Heart of the Matter, our program which deals with real people, real life, real issues. Today we're talking about agriculture and Nigeria's development. And we have with us our guest, Ada Osakwe. Ada, you have a very long and very interesting history. From your educational side, distinguished MBA from Kellogg's Management Institute. I recall from what I read about you, you had the Dean's Prize, excellent stuff like that. You've also been in private equity for quite a long time. If I recall, you started your business career with BNP Paribas, trading bonds. You moved from BNP Paribas. I think you spent time in African Development Bank, Actis's private equity team in Africa. And then until the last administration expired, you were senior investment advisor to the previous Minister of Agriculture, Adesina, who is now the president of African Development Bank. And besides that, you have other accolades as well. You were listed on Forbes' list of the 20 youngest power women in Africa, and you're only 34 years old and 3 months, if I remember, not more, not less. This is awesome. Now, we're talking about infrastructure, agriculture today. And agriculture, when we look at the rebased GDP of Nigeria, in 2013, it came out about $510 billion US, of which agriculture accounted for 23%. That was even more than oil and gas. Now, when you look at oil and gas, prices have actually collapsed, or if you want to be more politically correct, have fallen significantly. That will probably say that agriculture accounts for even much more today. From a scriptural standpoint, if you look at Genesis, in the book of Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 to 29, God made humankind in his own image. And he basically bequeathed to us all the plants and all sorts of things for us to feed on. But even before we talk about your experience, one of the things I'm aware of is that you're an ex-diasporan who returned to Nigeria about 3 years ago. How has that process been for you, and what inspired you to come back here?
First of all, I'm so delighted to be back in Nigeria, at home, on my own soil. But having spent so much time across being outside, first of all, in Europe, where I studied, I did my undergrad there and my master's, and then I worked in investment banking. I then moved on to Tunisia, North Africa, which was a fantastic experience for me, because working with the African Development Bank, I got to really understand the continent in all its glory.
And that's where I first met you.
Exactly, on a project in infrastructure. And that was a great opportunity to really understand the needs and what we needed to do to really move Africa forward. I loved that experience because it helped me really see myself as an African, not just as a Nigerian, and the role that I can play with all I had learned to move the continent forward. Of course, after that, I moved to the US, but there was always home, called everything, all roads led back home to Nigeria. So having the opportunity to move back from the private sector, where I was working in private equity in New York, and have this opportunity to come into government was one that I didn't want to pass me by, because there's nothing like actually being at the center of where policies are actually formed and executed to affect the needs and what Nigeria's people require.
And of course, we're talking about your role as the senior investment advisor to Akinwunmi Adesina, who was the ex-Minister of Agriculture, yes?
Precisely.
Okay.
So I joined him in 2012 under the Tony Elumelu Foundation's secondment program, moved back as a senior investment advisor to basically drive what we were calling a government-enabled but a private sector-driven transformation of the economy. You talked about those large numbers and the importance of agriculture in our GDP, but until only recently, many people didn't see it that way because we were not maximizing the potential of agriculture. We still are not, Opuiyo. We still import so much of what Nigeria can actually produce locally.
Like rice, for example?
Rice, for example, we're importing that. We're spending over $5 billion annually on things just like rice and sugar and palm oil. So, you have a situation where 4 years ago, Dr. Adesina, while he was minister, said this had to stop. We've obviously seen previous administrations, mention it, but there was this concerted effort to say, let's stop bringing in so much and exporting jobs abroad and giving jobs to farmers in Brazil and the US and China. Let's give the jobs to our farmers here. And let's add value, not just produce and increase the yields of what comes out of our soil, but let's add value to it. Because I think that's a very important point I just want to stress when I talk about add value. It's not only about the farm and what's produced from the farm, but when we give those numbers of what's coming in terms of the imports into Nigeria, it's processed foods.
Yes.
It's stuff that maybe it's cocoa that has left Nigeria,
gone to Switzerland, come back as chocolate.
It's the rice that more or less people are producing and milling and polishing and sending to us, and that's what we're eating. It's not the paddy. So it's the tomato paste as opposed to the tomatoes. So how do we move the step further from the farm and actually add value to what we produce? And adding value is critical because it helps reduce the post-harvest losses, because our farmers overproduce. They have no markets to sell it to. So all the tomatoes rot in Kano when you're driving past during the tomato season. It's critical because even in terms of storage, many of them don't have the right storage facilities. So you need immediate markets for us to have that vibrant food industry.
But, are we not maybe even taking this beyond just the fields? Because, you know, one of the reasons why a lot of our produce gets rotted is because there's either no on-site processing, or we don't have, for example, proper evacuation, good roads, rail that can actually carry produce from the farms all the way to the markets. So it strikes me that we are looking, in addition to a core agriculture program, with an infrastructure program that has to support this.
Precisely, and that's why when you said earlier at some point, and you said infrastructure and instead of agriculture, I was going to tell you that precisely they coexist.
Absolutely.
And you know, agriculture today, as we talk about processing, you're precisely right. We cannot do it without the right infrastructure that's enabling processing, water, power for the factory to run, the roads to evacuate the produce. So I think it's really what I hope, and I already see this government looking into that, that the various arms of government, the various ministries, especially agriculture and power and works, can work hand in hand to ensure that we actually get the value of a vibrant food manufacturing industry.
Right. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll continue this discussion right afterwards. Stay tuned, viewers. We'll be back shortly. Welcome, viewers, back to the Heart of the Matter, where today we're talking about agriculture and its importance to Nigeria's development. And with me in the studio, I have Ada Osakwe. So Ada, before we went on the break, we were talking about the critical link between infrastructure and also agriculture. And one of the things I've read that you were able to do, working with Adesina as the ex-Minister of Agriculture, was lead to about $4 billion of new investment in this sector. I'm interested in a number of things. One, was that private investment? Was it a mix of private and maybe government, maybe multilateral investment as well? Was it local investment? Was it foreign? Was it a mix? And let's look at the impact. Was it actually all agriculture? Did some of this go towards that enabling infrastructure? Tell us about that.
No, it was something that we're very proud of, and it was very specific. It was private investment, because we were very focused on attracting private investors to Nigeria's agricultural sector. It was a mix of FDI and local investors. Actually, if you see the split in those numbers, we had a higher percentage of local investors who were actually committing that.
And of course, FDI means foreign direct investment.
Foreign direct investments from offshore investors. So we were very excited that our local investors were the ones also putting money to work in the agricultural sector more than actually FDI and the foreign investors. So where did that go? Agriculture is very exciting for me. I call myself today the creative food entrepreneur in terms of what I do, and this is where I found my passion today. And I say this because there's just so much across the value chain, so much across the areas of agriculture. So it's not just food crops. You're talking about the animal husbandry. You were talking about beef and the animal value chain as well. And then it's not just just a specific part of growing maybe the production, but we're talking about processing, we're talking about branding and the retail, the logistics of moving stuff. So there's so much that goes into it that any investor can come in and plug themselves into. And that's what, in my role as senior investment advisor, I showcase to people, to show them that, look, being in agriculture doesn't mean you're a farmer.
Yes.
Because some people always felt that the drudgery of being a farmer, and we also try to change the view
like
of how
we
don't like hard work. Some people also try to change the view of how farmers are seen. So raising the productivity levels, it's not only about holding a hoe and cutlass. It's about a nice tractor that's air conditioned, and he's moving and he's using his mechanization and plowing the fields the way they do in Iowa, in the US, or in the fields in Brazil. So let's really take things to that level. So we had a lot of investments going across the chain, from tomato processing to citrus, doing fruit concentrate locally. We also had investments going into rice, big investments going into rice from some of our big investors like Aliko Dangote. And another very interesting thing we did, and this one was a multilateral stroke government blend with private sector.
And multilaterals like the World Bank, I presume?
World Bank, but this was actually the German Development Bank, KfW.
KfW, yes.
So we were able to work with them to design a private equity fund, which is very innovative, very unique, that hasn't been done, at least that we know of anywhere else in Africa. But we're able to work with them to leverage development finance, that's money that was given to the government to say, okay, work in agriculture, and put that into a private equity fund that we designed, and said, okay, we would sponsor this fund as the government. Sponsor means we'll be the first investors and we will promote it. But then we would give it to a private fund manager to manage. That fund. So we designed it, we went through an RFP process, we got RFPs, requests for proposals. We got private, both local and foreign agricultural fund managers to come in. This fund is focused on small and medium enterprises in agriculture.
And what's the fund called?
It's called the Fund for Agricultural Financing in Nigeria. And it's a target $100 million fund.
So it's still in the process of raising, is it?
They're in the process of raising, but they've reached the first close. They've started investing.
And they closed it at how much?
$30 million.
That's not bad for a small, medium-sized enterprise.
Yes, so which began with the government, KfW, the German bank, and we also got the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Nigeria to commit $10 million to it. So it was very exciting because as a government, we're able to see the importance of private sector managers who are efficient, who are effective, and who know it. And we said, okay, we're going to give this to you, and you just manage. And now they do it. We escrow the government funds so that if there's a capital call, it's available there. It's available.
Correct. No budgeting stories.
No budgeting stories. So we have a fund manager out here in Lagos who won the bid, who won the proposals, and they're managing it now. And that's exciting, and that goes into the $4 billion as well.
But you see, this is really interesting because you've talked about, agriculture not just being about on the farm. You talked about the branding work, the marketing, the packaging, the transportation. Now we're seeing it actually impacting in the capital markets. And the capital markets surely are one of the critical media via which we'll be looking to raise even more long-term capital.
That is true.
To invest in infrastructure, the ancillary infrastructure, agriculture, and all that entails. So I think that's a really, really good story. So let's talk about how ordinary folks in Nigeria can get more involved in agriculture, because you're describing a value chain that starts, of course, no doubt at the farms, or the ranches or whatever. The food comes out, the food's processed, it's packaged. At some point, it eventually hits shelves in shops either locally in Nigeria or overseas, wherever that is. That's an amazing value chain, and we hear a lot about agriculture being a sector that can create a lot of jobs. So with the sort of large population of young unemployed people that we have today, tell us, where exactly do you think our young people should be playing in agriculture today?
Across the value chain, everywhere. And anything from, I worked a lot with we had a program called the Youth Employment in Agriculture program while we were in the ministry. And I got to interact with so many young people doing anything from having a small fish farm, selling catfish to the market and making some good money for at least a 25-year-old person, significant funds, or to doing poultry and laying having layers and selling their eggs in the market. So you have that aspect of it, and you have those who are doing cassava. We try to push a lot of cassava in terms of the opportunities
we have
in
cassava bread now.
We have cassava bread today, using the flour and mixing it with wheat flour. So it's really across the chain, and it's so nice to see people actually today saying to me, Ada, I've left my job and I'm doing agriculture. Or that farm in my dad's village, I'm now farming. Or what can I farm? I say, go do rice, go do cassava, and you'd be able to sell it. So that's really nice. I also push people that you don't have to start at the farm. I haven't started at the farm. I've started at the processing level and the branding the branding level.
Okay. I think you have some of your produce,
yes,
which you're going to show us later on.
Yes, that's true. So starting at that level, and then buying from farms, because as I mentioned to you earlier, in some of our produce, especially like fresh produce, we have up to 60% post-harvest losses because
that's a high
you don't have the right storage or transportation. But having a market, like just being able to buy that fresh produce directly from a farmer, a woman who's doing pawpaws or whatever, and you take it from her, you cut it, you clean it, put it in a bag, and you sell it to ShopRite.
Sure.
That alone is a business.
Absolutely.
So I try to encourage people to not see it only as a farm, but you can play a role in the middle as a processor, buying from farmers, adding value by either packaging it right and then selling it on.
We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion, and probably with a bigger focus on private investment in agriculture.
Yeah.
Viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Heart of the Matter, viewers, where today we're talking with Ada Osakwe about agriculture and the impact on Nigeria's development. We were having a very stimulating discussion, about various aspects of agriculture. And we said when we come back, we're going to focus on private investment in agriculture. Before we get into that, I want to ask you this question, because I'm looking at agriculture now as a business. How competitive are we as Nigerian agriculture in global terms from your perspective?
Not competitive.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
But we can get there
Right.
very quickly too if we just have focus. We're not competitive if we start even from the farm, and let's even start from the lab.
Yes.
Research and development.
Okay.
You need to have the right yield. So it's not enough to say we have 80 million hectares of arable land.
Yes.
Only 60% of it is not being used and it's available to be used. It's not enough to say that, because even when you put something on the ground, I want to get the right amount of tonnage per hectare.
So the productivity of the land.
The productivity of the land, the yields we're getting from our seeds are not high enough, or the agricultural practices. So it takes a combination of research and science, as well as the right agricultural practices to ensure that we raise our productivity.
But Ada, we talk so much about how we have all this arable land in Nigeria.
Yes.
So is it an issue of maybe the soil condition? Is it an issue of maybe just the way we actually practice farming? I know that the ex-Minister of Agriculture, Adesina, he made a lot of play on dealing with the fraud in the fertilizer part of this. Where is the problem? Why aren't we getting those yields?
So it was a mix of not using fertilizers, or the fertilizers not getting to the farmers, because farmers had to get comfortable with using fertilizers.
Yes.
And it's a big part is just the right practices. It's switching to mechanized farming, not just a hoe and cutlass, but it's about doing mechanized plowing and laying of your seeds and harvesting as well. So we need to raise the bar when it comes to that. When Israel at some point, and the Israelis have done a lot with very little land.
Absolutely.
And they said to us, they were like, you're so blessed. Nigeria, you're so blessed. You just throw anything on the ground and it grows. And we just don't see that. And we're not maximizing that potential. So it's not enough to talk about that potential to be competitive. We need to do something
it's more
about
money.
it.
If we're going mechanized farming, there's a lot of money in equipment, plant, etc., to make it work.
Yeah.
But let's focus back on private investment now. I think we've already discussed and agreed that it's very important in this space.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to use you as an example because you've got a private investment firm, Agrolay.
Yeah.
So you're already doing things in that space.
Yeah.
Perhaps that could be an example to other people as to what the private investors can do. So tell us about Agrolay and what you do.
So Agrolay Ventures is actually an agricultural holding company. We invest in innovative food companies, very early stage. So we invest in existing companies and we incubate our own. I was very passionate about agriculture, as I mentioned, and the food industry and food processing. But I was also very passionate about the fact that young entrepreneurs don't get early stage capital, the financing that is required, because everybody always wants, oh, you need to have 5-year operating history, you need to have collateral. So it's like, how do we take risk early on to actually move this thing forward? So that's what the firm does. So when we talk about incubating our own, so these are ideas that I've had over time, and I felt, oh my gosh, why can't we do this in the food industry? So there are two companies. One is the Newly Juice Company, which is an innovative beverage company, healthy beverage company that utilizes fruits and vegetables sourced directly from farmers across Nigeria. I talked about the 60% post-harvest losses. It gets to me. So it's like, how do we buy from farmers and make it into a juice product and also deal with the fact that Nigerians are not as healthy as we think we are.
And you brought some of your products along with you.
Yes, we have. So that's Newly Juice. That's one of them. So the Newly Juice
Maybe you can show it to the cameras. Let's have a look.
Yes, we have 9 recipes. This is one of them.
And what's that particular one?
It's called Tropical Heat. It's got red bell pepper, so that's tatashe.
Wow.
It's got pawpaw, pineapple, parsley, and basil, all locally farmed, and it's very, very exciting. So would you like to try some? I think you should.
Oh, wow. I'm on the spot.
You're on the spot. Try some.
And what if I don't
delicious.
like it?
You tell me, but
well,
I doubt it. If you drink pawpaw, if you like fruits and vegetables, nothing is added. Everything is all natural. Not even water is added.
Wow. Can I have another drink?
Of course, you should. It's yours.
Well, all I can say is I recommend this. Newly Tropical Heat. I'm not sure what the heat's going to be about, but I guess it has to do with the pepper. But certainly, it's very, very tasty. I mean, I really enjoyed that drink, and I will sneak this one away. And what else have you brought with you to show us?
I also have a second product, which is our other company called Agrolay. So my partner and my partner is out in the States. You know, I got tired of seeing Italian pasta sauce when I was walking down the shelves when I lived and studied abroad, or seeing Mexican salsa all in a jar.
That's right.
And Nigerians, we would buy these things and go home and then add our own pepper to make it spicy and the way Nigerians eat. So I said, but we eat rice and stew. You know what? Nigerians are consuming 5 million metric tons of rice annually, and it's eaten with stew. So why don't we give them the stew? Now people are all sitting in traffic. So that is basically
stew in a pot.
It's stew in a jar.
So all those bachelors out there, this could make your life so much easier. And it sits on your shelf. You don't have to refrigerate it. And it's 2 years shelf stable. So it can last for 2 years.
Yes, right there.
But of course, once you open it, it's got to go in the fridge.
It goes in the fridge and it can last for another 12 days.
Wow.
So we said, let's give a convenient option to Nigerians, but it's tasty and authentic.
Fantastic. And are these in the shops today?
Not yet. In the new year.
Okay, so we're looking out very soon. I presume you're going to have some kind of promotional campaign.
Of course. So billboards, they'll see it. They'll know when Niger Stew is out there.
Fantastic. Well, Niger Stew coming. I might have the opportunity myself to test it even before anybody else does.
Yes.
So I'm sure I'll survive. I mean, that is awesome.
So that's really the example of how we're just trying to showcase opportunities. And I'm not directly farming today.
Yes.
I want to. Well, right now we're looking for
potentially. You're basically taking the produce from the farm, you're
processing it, packaging it in a nice way that today I would want to say that this should be able to sit in a store nicely in the US or wherever else.
Yes.
So
and in Nigeria.
And in Nigeria, of course. So let's raise the bar when it comes to food packaging and processing, and actually start getting the value and the gains of that $2 trillion industry.
And of course, other people can do this. Not that I'm trying to create competition for you, but the point is that private investors can actually do this type of thing.
Yes, and it's quite exciting to see that when you look at the private equity funds raised in over the last year. I believe agriculture-focused funds has seen the most funds raised to date. So it's getting pretty popular, and that's very exciting for us.
I mean, just to give give a sense of that scale, I mean, some figures that I saw recently say about $4 billion were raised, say, in 2014, 2013, 2014.
Towards agriculture.
Private equity, but including agriculture as well. So there's really been quite a lot there. But look, as we're winding up now, we've talked a lot about where we came from, where we are today, all the exciting things happening, all the opportunities. Where do you see us in the next 10 years? Are we going to get it right at last? Because you mentioned so much more still needs to be done. Yes. Are the policies in place? Do you see the evolution that we need to get to where we need to in 10 years' time? What do you think?
I think we're getting there. We will. There is so much potential. What's so important is that the awareness is now there, or it's emerging. Okay. It wasn't 4 years ago.
Yes.
So it's so nice to see. We're sitting here talking about agriculture and the opportunities, and that maybe wouldn't have been the case 4 years ago. Yes. So just creating that awareness is just the beginning of unlocking that potential. Yes. And it's so nice to see the direction we're going. If more of us are doing things like these, if more private equity and investments and the federal government is putting policies in place to ensure we're not importing as much, but they're stimulating local production and local food industry. I believe that in the next 10 years, Nigeria will really truly be a powerhouse in agriculture.
Fantastic. You know, I like to end things with scripture very often, and I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 to 29, where it says, God created humankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and every creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I now give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the entire earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Agriculture is a mission. It's a mission that God's given to us, and I hope that you've really enjoyed and been blessed by this episode today. Ada, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Perhaps we'll have you here again sometime in future.
And thank you to the entire team as well for
Pleasure.
having me.
Pleasure. Stay blessed and see you next episode. Bye-bye.